Welcome. I'm Dave Bennett, a member of the Rotary Club of Neepawa here in Manitoba, District 5550. Welcome to Rotary Reads. This is the 111th year of the production of our magazine, which is now simply called Rotary. And that issue looks at the future. So a little later in the program, we're going to be taking a look at that. But we have a very topical issue that I want to make sure we have enough time for. And guest reader for today is Mike Boyle, member of our club. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's great. Now, Michael, I know, was a student when I was first teaching at NACI, so we've known each other for a long time.
Yes.
You went off to a career and you came back and retired in Neepawa.
Right.
Give us a little background, what you did, and how you got into Rotary, Mike.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. After completing university, I went through education and enjoyed a great career along Highway 21. And I spent my years there as a teacher and mainly as a principal, and had such great experiences doing that. But after 33 or 4 years, whatever it was, and retirement came, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to move back to my hometown of Neepawa? So my wife, Linda, and I moved back here about 10 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, we're certainly glad to have you back here, and we're glad that you searched us out and you you joined the Rotary Club. So
well, search you out, I think, is exactly what happened. What I found, Dave, from my experiences as a teacher, the things that gave me the greatest satisfaction were, of course, the day-to-day and seeing success of students, but the extra things, all the things that you do with students, for students, after school hours, and then within the community. So many things and projects to be involved in. So when Linda and I moved here, that just felt that there was one piece missing in my life, and that was something I'd done all my life.
Right.
So when I checked around, people said, if you want to join an organization that's doing a lot in the community, it's Rotary Club. And so I was fortunate enough to be invited to join, and I certainly haven't regretted that choice. And I'm lucky to be a member of our Neepawa Rotary Club, Dave.
Well, we're certainly lucky to have you and glad to have you. And if we'd be luckier if we could find some more, just like you. So hopefully promoting the Rotary through this program. Not only does it promote the Neepawa area with Rotary, but we're across Manitoba and Canada. And so if you're watching and you know of a Rotary Club in your area, maybe go check them out and just see what they're like.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we'll get to the program here, Mike. Very topical item that you've chosen from the magazine. So you want to intro that and read to us what you've got.
Well, there's no avoiding COVID-19 these days, as we all know. Every conversation that you ever have seems to involve that. And so I was pretty interested in looking at this article, and it got me to thinking how much faith we put into our science and medicine and our modern world, and how lucky we are. I mean, if one of us gets ill in Neepawa, we have great doctors here, we have great facilities, and we rely on science to give us that help and medicine to move forward with our health. And to some extent, I think we've taken it for granted. And so a pandemic really catches us off guard when we seem to have no defense to it, or very little. And so it's going worldwide, we're struggling. And if we go back before all this modern science and medicine, all you have to do is think about the bubonic plague as it raged across Europe and North Africa and parts of Asia, where tremendous numbers of the world population were being wiped out. And I can't imagine the feeling, Dave, as that pandemic moved across from town to village to city. Well, and people were terrified.
Well, the fear of it, and I'm sure that they, when somebody moved in, they probably stoned them to death and got rid of them. They were just trying to keep the plague out and keep people, they were shunned. Anybody that got it was absolutely shunned.
Absolutely, there was no defense.
Right.
And I think what's really telling about it is the little child's game that has lasted to this day that came from that was Ring Around the Rosie.
Ah.
So Ring Around the Rosie, children were so used to seeing death in their cities and communities that they would hold hands and go around in a circle. Well, Ring Around the Rosie, the pustules and red sores that formed on people that had that disease, it was very evident. So that was the ring around the Rosie. The Rosie was the sore.
Okay.
And a pocket full of posies were the flowers that tried to take away some of the smell of the dying people. And so Ring Around the Rosie, a pocket full of posies, husha, husha, we all fall down. Well, the kids would all drop down to imitate the death that they were seeing all around them.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's a pretty sad statement, and we're doing way better than that, I think.
Well, I would hope so, but that's interesting. You should be writing articles for this magazine,
Yeah, I
Mike.
don't think so. But I think that, it's an interesting time. It's a difficult time. And so I thought this history of vaccinations written by Aaron Biba would be, a pretty good thing to talk about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's called A History of Vaccinations, written by Aaron Biba. And it starts off with 2,000 years of innovation gives the world a shot in the arm. So vaccines have prevented about 10 million deaths from disease since 1963, researchers estimate. So Rotary members know the power of vaccination well. The oral polio vaccine has helped bring cases of wild polio down 99.9% since 1988, with the virus remaining endemic in only 2 countries today. And now, as COVID-19 vaccines are being distributed around the world, the experience and knowledge that Rotary and its partners in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative have gained are helping protect communities from the pandemic. Rotary members are getting involved in supporting the COVID-19 vaccine rollout in some of the same ways they've been working to end polio, by raising awareness for vaccination in their communities, supporting health workers, combating misinformation and vaccine hesitancy, and advocating for fair and equal vaccine distribution in vulnerable communities. Clubs can partner with local health agencies and, where applicable, with our polio eradication partners, WHO and UNICEF, at the country level. World Immunization Week celebrated the last week of April every year, so right now, Dave, so that's why it's topical.
Oh, wow. When they view it, this may be a few weeks later, but as we tape it today, they were right in April the 28th, so we are there.
Anyway, it will take an outsized importance of this year. As the world looks toward immunization to stop the COVID-19 pandemic, we look back at the fascinating history of these life-saving medicines. And so this article is snippets from time and how it's changed our ability to deal with these pandemics through immunization or vaccination.
Well, it's been a long road, really, hasn't it? And you talked about the bubonic plague to begin with. That's hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but vaccination didn't get started till a while after that.
But really, the roots of it go back thousands of years.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty interesting.
Right. Well, fill me in.
The first piece here, Dave, goes back to 430 BC, so that's a long time ago. And it was observed by a Greek historian, Thucydides. People who survived a plague in Athens that started in this year, they were never affected by it again. And so, just by observation, starting to understand the idea of herd immunity, which we talk about often enough now.
Right. If you had it once, you don't get it again. Not all diseases are like that, but certain ones are. That's right.
Exactly. So this goes back a long ways. Mm-hmm. So now, if we jump forward to 1549 to the first written records it's called variolation. But so in 1549, the earliest written mention of variolation appears in China. The technique, whose name is derived from the Latin word for smallpox, involved inoculating a person with the virus to induce a mild form of the illness. Health practitioners removed dried scabs from people with smallpox, ground them, and blew the powder into the nostrils of the uninfected, so left nostril for the girls, right nostril for the boys. I have no idea why that would be, Dave.
I have, when I saw that, I wondered, I don't know why. Maybe somebody out there can let us know.
Maybe it's like washing. Girls on the left, I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, about 1% to 2% of those who underwent the technique died from smallpox. And that compared with 30% of people who contracted the disease without variolation. So the use of this method is thought to have begun as early as 200 BC, but this was the first written record of it in 1549.
But that's interesting. The percentage is there. If you do the variolation, you've probably saved, there was only 30% that wasn't done, 2% died from it.
Right.
The percentages aren't the same, but the concept's the same with AstraZeneca.
Yes, exactly.
Very few...
The blood clots.
Blood clots. from that. And a lot of people are scared because of that. But really the percentages,
Are
the
very
risk are very, very low in that compared to your risk of having a very severe case of COVID.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's where it started, to start to look at those types of things.
Wow.
So then anyway, we jump forward to 1706. Onesimus, now he was a Libyan-born enslaved worker in Massachusetts. And he shows his enslaver, a Puritan minister named Cotton Mather, he shows him a childhood scar and explains how variolation was used in North Africa. So after studying the procedure, Mather is convinced it could be an effective weapon against the scourge of smallpox and persuades a local doctor to use it when Boston is hit by an epidemic of the disease in 1721. So by the 1700s, they're learning from people around the world, in this case from North Africa,
Right.
this variolation and how it worked. So that was the notion anyway.
There were the smallpox, I think, really just kind of moved from community to community. You'd have it wasn't a pandemic because it was worldwide, but it was endemic or an epidemic, as they would call it, in a certain area.
Yes,
and,
right.
Yeah, it was very serious. So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and we know how it decimated our indigenous populations here in what we call the New World.
Right.
They were absolutely unprepared for that. And so, yeah, pretty serious thing.
And the unpreparedness probably goes back to the earlier ideas of once you've got a kind of disease, your immune system builds up against that. But you bring a new disease into a new area with no immunity whatsoever.
Zero.
And that is exactly what happens.
Yeah, that was very sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we jump forward now to 1777. And so we're in the height of the American Revolution. And so it brings into play George Washington. So it reads, U.S. General George Washington orders the vaccination of every soldier in the Continental Army who has never had smallpox. Washington himself had contracted the disease at age 19. And so there's a quote here. George's nose was lightly pitted with pockmarks, a defect discreetly edited from most sanitized portraits. So this is written by Ron Chernow in his Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington, A Life. Anyway, in which he characterized the young man's illness as a fantastic stroke of luck, furnishing him with immunity to the most virulent scourge of 18th century armies.
It's that's really well, and obviously other people would have had that opportunity as well. Well, I know.
Opportunity. I got sick and survived.
You know, but maybe all the viewers don't. I'm a twin. And anytime one of us got a disease, our mother made darn sure the other one got it at the same time.
Whether it's chickenpox or measles, or
That's right. You may as well have both the kids down with this, with the mumps as just one of them, because the other one's going to get it sometime.
Yeah, so. Might as well have two screaming at once.
That's right. So that's interesting.
I came from a family of 6. It wasn't too different for 6 kids, Dave.
I'm sure it wasn't.
Lots of Irish twins, you know.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's some. I don't know if you want to comment, Dave, on the picture there with George Washington, but.
Well, you would certainly the people there in the picture that are anti-vaxxers.
Yes.
And are very much afraid of it, but they didn't have as much knowledge or experience with vaccination. Most of our people do now, even though there's still a lot of people that are afraid of it.
Yes, and I think fear is a lot of it. So that's 1777. So the Continental Army has given the vaccination. So we jump forward to 1796. So now things start to speed up a little bit. And I found this one very interesting. In rural England, after investigating a folk belief that milkmaids never got smallpox, Edward Jenner, a London-trained doctor, inoculates 8-year-old James Phipps with liquid drawn from the lesions of Sarah Nelms, a milkmaid who had contracted cowpox, a significantly milder ailment than smallpox. Now imagine in our day and age, if we just go into the village and say, you young fellow, we're going to use you as a guinea pig. Ma'am, you don't mind, just bring your son, because that's really basically what happened. After the boy's relatively quick recovery from cowpox, Jenner then variolates James with smallpox, and yet no symptoms appear. The boy's exposure to cowpox, Jenner concludes, had made him immune to smallpox. He dubs his discovery vaccination, from the Latin word vacca, meaning cow.
Well, I mean, these are the variations that we're seeing in COVID.
Yes.
You know, right now, that the virus is mutating to produce more virulent
Yes.
forms of it. Perhaps smallpox was really a mutation from cowpox.
Yeah, it could well be.
Yeah.
But it gave you that bit of immunity that saved you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, there is a picture here. It's sort of a Victorian setting in a doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And here you've got a woman, presumably the boy's mother, and she's there, and the kid, you can't really see his face, but he looks a little tense there, Dave. And so they've rolled up his sleeve, and there the doctor is basically infecting him with cowpox, or maybe later with smallpox. We can't tell. From
Yeah,
the picture.
the underneath that picture, it's referring to another little picture on the right, but it talks about tens of thousands of people that protested compulsory smallpox vaccination.
Right. So that came a little later, but
yeah.
we're seeing so much of that today, unfortunately. But it's a picture of a deadly-looking snake with a skeleton behind it. Looks like it's attacking a woman who's trying to save the child and move the child away. And so there was a lot of fear of vaccinations, and you can understand why. But we all know the value to it today, of course. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we go on to 1801 to 1803. After the inept handling and administration of the first Jenner vaccine in the United States, President Thomas Jefferson designs a container that will more reliably transport the vaccine and inoculates 30 people at Monticello. And I quote, "It was mainly thanks to Jefferson that the reputation of vaccine was saved." And this is asserted by Arthur Allen in his book Vaccine, the controversial story of medicine's greatest lifesaver.
Yeah, it's interesting to reliably transport the
Yes.
vaccine. You know, we're talking about the Pfizer when it was the first one that was approved,
Right.
and the transportation of that, and it had to be kept at the extremely cold temperatures.
Yes.
And I even heard information that they had to be careful during the transportation of it as well, that it didn't decrease the value of the vaccine.
So you can see the importance from that early time
Yeah.
on to now. How you handle the vaccine is all important.
Yeah, we think that the COVID vaccine came about rather quickly, or too quickly in some people's opinion.
Yes.
But there was all this background, and they were working on the mRNA
Yes.
for years as well. I think that's later on.
It's later on, but
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
that's right.
Modern science moves ahead in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we go on to now 1879. After instructing his assistant to inject some chickens with Pasteurella multicida, the germ that causes cholera in birds, French chemist and microbiologist Louis Pasteur, who had first isolated the bacterium, well, he goes on vacation. But so does his assistant, without following his boss's orders. When the assistant returns, he belatedly injects the month-old bacteria into the birds, and though they become sick, they don't die. And Pasteur discovers that they are immune to additional doses of the bacteria. He calls the intentional lessening of an organism's virulence attenuation. Over the next 50 years, scientists will use live, attenuated, or inactivated killed bacteria or viruses to create vaccines for typhoid, plague, pertussis, tuberculosis, and other diseases.
Yeah, I think that's where the fear is embedded, it came from, that you really are in fact using the disease to inoculate you against the disease.
Right, which mRNA does not do.
That's correct,
Yeah,
right.
which is a huge advancement.
Step that we've made, is correct.
But I also think it's interesting in this that sometimes it's by the screw-ups that we have, like an assistant who doesn't do as he's asked, that suddenly you discover something entirely new. And that was having a lessened bit of vaccine or virus, I guess, doesn't have the same effect and allows the body's chance to overcome it.
Yeah.
And that was by accident.
A good scientist doesn't really force the issue to try and find something so much that they don't see
Yes.
a discovery right in front of their nose.
Well, even if you go back to Thucydides, and he realized people that got sick once and recovered never got sick again.
Yeah.
So it's that observation and being honest about what you see.
What you see, yeah.
So that's 1879. Now we move on to 1925. So while working on a vaccine for tetanus and diphtheria, Gaston Raymond, a French veterinarian, demonstrates that the addition of substances such as tapioca, agar, starch oil, and even breadcrumbs increases the vaccine's effectiveness. The following year, British immunologist Alexander Glennie finds that aluminum salts are the most effective additive, or adjuvant, as such additives come to be known, to increase the effectiveness of in this case, the diphtheria vaccine. Adjuvants remain an essential ingredient in vaccines. And most recently, modern biotech pharmaceutical companies have been forming partnerships to add their proprietary adjuvants to help boost the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccine and reduce the dosage needed for each patient, allowing for the inoculation of more people.
And likely more of this will happen in terms of producing the vaccines and so on as well.
Yeah, they just get better and better.
Yeah, I'm sure they're working at this all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. I wonder, that'd be a deep research to see why certain particular, sort of common everyday substances,
yes,
can be used to increase these vaccines.
Rotary Club's going to task you with that, Dave.
Do you think so?
Well, maybe. Anyway.
I don't have enough years left, I don't think, to complete that.
Yeah. So we go to 1952-53. Leona Farrell, a biochemist and microbiologist at the University of Toronto, she finds that gently rocking vials of the polio virus stimulates its growth. So the discovery, known today as the Toronto method, enables researchers to mass produce poliovirus in order to conduct vaccine trials and revolutionizes the production of vaccines. Farrell is not allowed to attend a dinner honoring polio vaccine developer Jonas Salk that is held in a men's-only venue, although according to one account, she is permitted to stand at the doorway of the dining room to shake the great man's hand.
Looking at that from our day here, it's 70 years ago, I guess, but that's really the way it was, unfortunately. Yes. We've come a long, long way in terms of women's rights, and thank goodness we have women in Rotary, because they've surely improved the organization. There's no doubt about that.
They surely have.
and we have a member sitting across the room here that's a female member that's hearing what we're saying.
Well, that's good.
And nodding her head. And we have to tell everybody again that the first female president of Rotary International will be Jennifer Jones in 1922. And that's not the curler, and she is a Canadian.
Oh, really?
That's correct. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, from Toronto area. Yeah, they'll be seeing a lot of her in the magazine. Well, she's been in it. I've read an article of hers before. So
that's interesting. Yep. And to see the change.
Yes.
Which is long overdue. Okay, I flipped the page here, and now we move to 1955. Which was a very difficult time for many, as we know. But after a field trial involving 1.8 million Americans, Thomas Francis Jr. of the University of Michigan announces that Salk's polio vaccine is safe, effective, and potent. The work, the university's press release of 12 April reported, was financed by nearly $1 million worth of dimes, which have been donated to the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. The vaccine used cells from a cancer patient whose story was made famous in the 2010 book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And am I right in saying there's a movie about that too? I think there is.
I'm not sure.
I meant to check that and I forgot.
Yeah. I have tried at times to try and remember when I got the polio Salk vaccine.
Yes.
Because in 55 I'd be 12 years old. And honestly,
you are old.
I know. That's right. I cannot remember actually getting that polio vaccine, but I'm sure I did. Well, I'm sure it was a drop on a sugar cube, I think, is how we got it.
Yeah, I think it was
in those days.
Yes, I do remember getting that.
Yeah.
But interesting how things have changed. We worry about how people are being treated to get this shot and so on. But talking to an old friend of mine, well, probably about your age, Steve.
Really old friend of yours.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean it that badly. But he was talking about, he got polio and is crippled ever since. And he was a teaching colleague of mine, just the nicest guy. And he was telling me not so long ago what it was like for him growing up in Rossburn, Manitoba, on a farm. And at the, how old is he? 6 years old. He never got to grade 1, once he got polio, he was shipped to Winnipeg all by himself, and he was in a dormitory with hundreds of beds in it, lying there all by himself. Nobody could visit, and that's how he spent his grade 1 year.
Oh, isn't that terrible?
And that was polio back at that time. So things have changed, but it's been a hard world for many people.
That's right. We did Rotary Region number 5, which we did a couple of months ago
Yes.
with Chris Waddell.
Yes.
Was all regarding the polio and stories of survivors of polio and so on. So yeah, that polio and Polio Plus and Rotary are well entwined.
Well entwined.
That's
indeed.
correct. Yes.
So to go further, we move to 1961. The world's, and that's starting to sound a little closer.
Mm-hmm.
The world's 7th known cholera pandemic sweeps the globe, affecting 117 countries and infecting 1.7 million people before it is quelled in 1989. In a single week in 1973, health officials vaccinate 1 million people in Naples, Italy, limiting the fatalities there to 12 people.
Just 12.
So the power of vaccination.
Well, you know what struck me on that little paragraph, dated 1961,
Right.
and it was quelled in 1989.
How that's
28 years
Yes.
in order to quell that pandemic.
Because
I'm not trying to scare people,
Yes.
but if we don't get on top of this pandemic, we could be looking at years and years and years.
Absolutely. The huge advantage that we have now is science has moved so quickly from that time to develop. Like, this has been an amazing scientific story to create our vaccine so quickly.
Yes. And now we got to get it out and get it in the arms and
We do.
convince everybody in the world to
do it.
take it.
Yeah.
That's great. It's the duty. It's your duty to
Yes.
the whole world
It is.
to help.
It is. In 1966, the World Health Organization launches the Smallpox Eradication Program to stop the spread of the disease among the 60% of the world's population who are unvaccinated against it. And in 1980, WHO announces that smallpox has been eradicated worldwide.
Well, that's 14 years
Yeah.
to do that. Well, it gets minimized so much. Well, it's kind of like polio in our country. You
Yes.
don't see polio in the Western world here at all.
No.
And we can become complacent about it.
We take it for granted.
Yeah, take it
Yes,
for
we do.
granted. And so people stopped being inoculated against smallpox and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
Is what happened. But they finally did, it says eradicated worldwide. So that, I believe, is the only disease that has effectively been, major disease, has been effectively eliminated
Yeah.
from the world population. And we're working on polio to
And
be
we're
the
close.
second one.
This
We're
close.
that close, down to 2 countries.
Yeah.
African region was declared polio free just a few months ago.
Wow.
So, yeah.
The power of vaccination. So in 1985, Rotary International, we've just been talking about it, launches Polio Plus, kickstarting the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. The program grows to include the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, WHO, UNICEF, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, that's the Vaccine Alliance. By the end of 2020, cases of wild polio occur in just 2 countries. So we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, wow.
So 2002, routine smallpox vaccination in the United States ended in 1972, but anticipating the use of the disease as a biological weapon in a possible war with Iraq, President George W. Bush lays out a plan for inoculating 500,000 military personnel and up to 10 million civilian healthcare and emergency workers. On 21st of December, to promote public awareness, the president receives a smallpox vaccination. And it indicates he was pricked 15 times, according to Arthur Allen's vaccine, with a tiny bifurcated needle whose prongs held between them a droplet of vaccine virus derived from an infected calf. So even though smallpox has been eradicated, it wouldn't keep someone from redeveloping it and using it as a weapon. And that's a pretty sad thought, isn't it?
It really is a sad thought. Wow. I mean, and there's so many diseases out there. Yeah, well, that type of warfare has been banned. But how far does a ban go?
Yeah.
A ban's only good if everybody believes in it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
right.
hadn't understood that. I didn't know that had happened back
Yeah.
at that time. 'Cause that's not very long ago.
No.
And that brings us to today, 2020 at least,
Right.
so coming up to today.
Yeah.
In one of the most spectacular scientific efforts ever, researchers around the world study, test, and release 2 vaccines to tackle the previously unknown COVID-19 virus. Rather than using killed or attenuated viruses, the vaccines use a type of genetic material called mRNA, or messenger RNA. And that is a snippet of the COVID-19 virus's genetic material encased in a special coating of fatty acids, acts like a code book for the immune system to build defenses against the virus. This revolutionary type of vaccine, which has been studied for several decades and trialed since the 1990s on other diseases, is thought to be much safer than the traditional method of using live whole virus. Experts predict the breakthrough of this successful technique will forever change the course of vaccine development and production.
And just in the nick of time, too, you could really say, I think,
Yes.
to get to that stage, because, I mean, we're going to get through this COVID-19 because it started in 2019.
Yes.
That's really why it was called COVID-19. And we're going to get through it eventually.
Yes.
But there's more on the horizon. There's more coming. There's no doubt about it. We're never going to be done with this. Vaccination is going to be a part of life forever.
Yes.
And this new mRNA method being much safer in that it doesn't actually put the disease in your body.
Right.
It trains your immune system to fight against the
To
disease.
recognize
Yeah.
and attack. Yeah.
And attack and so on.
We're pretty fortunate. And how we introduced this was how much we rely on science and medicine to help us through these things. And I think this article is a wonderful look at how, from back in times before Christ through to now, how that's changed and how fortunate we are to live in this time period.
Well, it certainly shows how long it's taken, or
Yeah.
how long we've been dealing with this particular problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's great, Mike. That's super. That was so interesting, and taken in through the history there. I was going to do an article on reading, but I'm going to save that for another time. We've really had fun with this one here. I think I'll just pick up for a moment and carry on the theme a little bit in the same issue, which is the April 21 issue you're reading from, on page 60. It's entitled "The Power of Partnership," and it's written by the chair of the foundation trustee. The Rotary Foundation is the main vehicle by which Rotary International supports all of its global initiatives.
Right.
And locally here, and in all Rotary clubs, we contribute to the foundation. We raise money for the foundation. Our Paul Harris Awards that we do from our club every year, and we have over 100 members of our community that have become the Paul Harris members through these initiatives. And every time we nominate and choose somebody for that award, it requires us to send $1,000 US to the foundation, to the polio, not necessarily Polio Plus, there's other areas we can send it to, but that is where the foundation gets its money. And the one thing about the foundation, Bob Durson explained this on an earlier program, is that the money is invested for 3 years. The interest from that money runs the foundation. And so the full $1,000 that you donate, or the $20 or whatever you donate to the foundation, goes to a project at 3 years hence.
Right.
So that you know that you're getting all your money. And Rotary is one of the been rated one of the highest organizations and foundations in terms of delivering and the money that's given to them.
Well, Dave, I think there are many generous people around us and who like to give, but it's always a concern how much of the money you give goes to the project and how much goes to salaries, et cetera, that never really shows up in a sense to the project you had intended it for.
Yeah.
And Rotary does such a good job of that. The money goes to that project and you can feel confident that it's actually doing something.
Well, 2 reasons. The foundation, as I mentioned, it takes the 3 years to spend the money. And the other reason really is that when we do a project, you connect with a club somewhere else in the world that oversees that for you.
Right.
So you've got that connection.
It's all volunteer.
Yeah, doing that. So anyway, he writes a short article in every magazine really, and it's called "The Power of Partnership." He starts off, make no little plans. American architect Daniel Burnham once said, they have no magic to stir our blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. When Rotary heeds Burnham's advice and follows through with action, we shine. We made big plans when we spearheaded a global initiative to eradicate polio. Last year, the World Health Organization's African region was certified polio-free. When the coronavirus hit about a year ago, the Rotary Foundation quickly mobilized and awarded 319 COVID-19 specific disaster response grants for $7.9 million. To date, we have further awarded 317 COVID-19 global grants for about $24.1 million, wow. Which combined with previously approved global grants, the grant sponsors repurposed, so they changed midstream a bit to fight COVID, to support coronavirus response, has made for a total outflow of more than $32.7 million out of the foundation.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
We're now thinking big again, the article goes on to say. Through our program of scale grants, we will award a $2 million grant annually to one project that aligns with one or more of Rotary's areas of focus. The Rotary Club of Federal Way, Washington has made no little plans. As sponsor of the first program of a scale grant, the club is leading in partnership with Zambian Rotary Clubs and Malaria Partners Zambia, an effort to help end a disease that is widespread in that country. Through the program called Partners for a Malaria-Free Zambia, Rotary will help train 60 Zambian district health officials, 382 health facility staff, and 2,500 community health workers to save lives. It will also equip them with the necessary supplies and gear to get the job done. Their aim is no less than reducing malaria by 90% in 10 target districts in 2 of Zambia's provinces. Malaria is a widespread disease.
Absolutely.
You know, you need to have malaria vaccinations in order to go into certain countries. So, so that this is another problem that Rotary is tackling. And one club, just like little old Neepawa Club started this, the Federal Way Club of Washington.
Wow.
Yeah, is the one that started it to get it going.
Think big.
Yeah, think big, that's for sure. And there'll be more about this in the next issue. It's come out. The next issue of our magazine is talking about these large-scale grants.
Wow.
So we're moving on with that. Well, we've got just a couple of minutes left here, Mike.
Probably about 2, I think.
Yeah. Well, no, we've got a little more than 2. I wonder, you had picked a couple of little notes there about what a couple of clubs are doing. Maybe you can tag in on 1 or 2 of those. Was it back on, where was it? Page 18, I think. About Rotary projects around the globe.
Yeah, there's all kinds of them. I could just quickly.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple that you maybe thought were interesting.
Well, we're people of action. So, for example, in Ecuador, humanitarian and political crises have driven millions of Venezuelans from their homeland in recent years, with Ecuador and Colombia taking in large populations of refugees. Because Ecuador's health system is ill-equipped to assist many of the immigrants, the Rotary Club of Portoviejo San Gregorio has embarked on a mission to provide them and other people in need with free medical examinations and basic medicines. Gustavo Guyler Morales, a doctor and the president of the club, is teamed with an oncologist, a gynecologist, and a pediatrician who are fellow club members, 4 additional medical volunteers, and Rotarian and Rotaract helpers to conduct the clinics. Venezuelans make up 95% of those served by the clinics, according to Guyler Morales. Colombians and a few Ecuadorians make up the rest. So the club has provided $3,000 for the clinics thus far. The project, which they are calling Health Far From Home, began in early 2019, and while COVID-19 concerns stalled the effort last year, Guyler Morales says they plan to resume when possible. So a small club, a few people with skills get together, get some cash, and they're helping so many people in that area.
That's right. The Neepawa Club does do, some global work, and often it's tagging on to another project.
For sure.
We don't really have the resources kind of in our club to get going on a project. Although I remember years ago when Bob Finlayson's brother was in, I'm guessing, maybe Nigeria, on a mission. and he's a pharmacist.
Right.
And we did connect, since we had the connection through Bob and through his brother, and we set up a grant, and in order to send, I should know, but a piece of equipment that he needed that he didn't have over there. So I really felt good about being able to do something like that,
Yeah.
and the club did too.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, that we could do that sort of thing. As you mentioned to me off screen earlier, we spend more money locally, in terms of supporting our local
Yes, we do.
community and that sort of thing. But we do like to have the connection with the global community and
Yes.
support our money over there. That's for sure. That's right. Yeah, well, have you got one more that really tweaked your interest?
Yeah,
there?
absolutely.
Go ahead. Yep.
Well, there's one in Iceland. I might butcher
Go ahead.
some of the names here, but in Iceland, it's famously lacking in trees. But fossils and archaeological records suggest that the island once boasted rich forests. In 1950, the government began a national reforestation campaign, and Rotary clubs embraced the idea. Many clubs like mine, the Rotary Club of Akureyri, have been planting trees since 1950 and are responsible today for quite big woods, says Sofia Gisledottir. As governor of the District 1360, Gisledottir grabbed a shovel and took up the annual tradition of district leaders planting a tree in their club's honor. A new trend among clubs is collaborating with schools to plant orchards of the youth, special tree fields with fruit trees and berry bushes, Gisledottir says. District 1360 provided $7,500 for the effort, which saw the Rotary Club of Hofgabrdair and the Rotary Club of Keflavik cultivate plots of schools in their communities beginning in June 2020. The project will allow young children and their families to learn about vegetation and to raise awareness of environmentally friendly lifestyles, food waste, and food production, she says. So people of action.
Locally, I mean, we've planted trees on Veterans Way.
Yes.
I remember Wayne Hildebrand was a key person in our club that got that
And down
going.
in the flats.
And down in the flats as well. So we got involved in that tree planting project as well. So, well, thanks, Mike, for coming in today. I've really enjoyed working with you on this and having a chance to talk about some of the things that Rotary does.
It's a pleasure to be a part of Rotary, and it's a pleasure to be here talking to you today, Dave.
That's
Thank you
great.
very much.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed the program today and that you'll check out other programs in our series as Rotary Reads. Thank you.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build good? Will it better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? When we pay it forward, it will be returned. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned?